It begins with a question most people never expect to see written in their own genetic code. A quiet evening, your email buzzes, and suddenly the world feels different. You open your ancestry report, and there it is. One word, one identity, one lineage that stands out from all the others. Jewish. Not a religion, not a belief system, a population label embedded in the strands of your DNA. The realization sends a ripple through your chest. How can something tied to culture, to ritual, to story, appear as a biological marker in your genes? The answer is older than nations, older than borders, older even than the alphabet used to write the first stories of this people. And to uncover it, we must travel through deserts, empires, shattered temples, and exile, following a genetic signal that has survived thousands of years of upheaval. But before we travel any farther into this mystery, before we climb into the ruins and sift through ancient bones and sample the DNA locked in history, make sure you're subscribed, because what you're about to discover is woven through the deepest layers of human identity, and the journey we're embarking on today is only the beginning of the human stories we're uncovering here. The truth is simple yet profound. Jewish ancestry appears in DNA results not because religion changes genes. Genes do not bend to belief or prayer, but because history leaves fingerprints. When a people endures together, migrates together, marries within its boundaries, and carries a shared story across continents, genetics, slow, stubborn, unchanging, records that journey. To follow these genetic traces, we go back nearly 4,000 years to the ancient Middle East, the Levant, a land of stone terraces, goat-herding tribes, cedar forests, and trade routes that wound like veins through the desert. This is where the earliest Israelites emerged, a Semitic people whose neighbors, Canaanites, Aramaeans, Phoenicians, shared their landscape and, at the start, much of their DNA. But something set this population apart, something that wasn't written in genetics at first, but in belief. They were one of the world's earliest communities united under a strict monotheism, a cultural shift, a story, a new identity woven through families, rituals, and laws. And as this identity strengthened, something else quietly began forming beneath the surface: population structure. Archaeologists at ancient sites across Israel and Palestine find pottery, inscriptions, household shrines, and tools, ordinary objects that map the daily lives of these early peoples. But in the last 2 decades, another kind of artifact has emerged: DNA preserved in ancient bones buried under collapsed homes, broken walls, and old sanctuaries. When geneticists sequence these remains, they reveal the same pattern repeating again and again. Lineages belonging to Y chromosome haplogroups J1 and J2, deeply rooted in the Middle East. On the maternal side, mitochondrial haplogroups like H and K tell a similar story of Levantine origin mixed with the wider Mediterranean world. This is the oldest genetic fingerprint of the Jewish people. But the story turns sharply in 586 BCE. The Babylonian Empire sweeps across the region, conquers the kingdom of Judah, and tears families from their homeland. Thousands are marched into exile. Imagine the scene: marketplaces burning, captives walking east under armed guards, priests carrying scrolls through dust storms, and children whispering their mother tongue as unfamiliar mountains rise on the horizon. Exile changes everything, except the determination to remain a people. In Babylon, Jewish communities build new structures, new rules, new rituals, but they stay close. Marriage occurs almost entirely within the community. As generations pass, a genetic boundary forms, not intentional, not engineered, but emergent, a byproduct of resilience, of cultural survival. When the Persian Empire later allows Jews to return home, Leaders like Ezra and Nehemiah strengthen these boundaries, encouraging endogamy to preserve identity. What they could not have known is that these cultural choices would echo across time, shaping the DNA of their descendants thousands of years later. For centuries, empires rise and fall over this ancient land. Greeks, then Romans, marched through the valleys. And then, in 70 CE, catastrophe strikes again. The Second Temple falls. Fire consumes Jerusalem. Once more, exile tears the people from their homeland, this time scattering them not to one place, but across continents. Ships leave for North Africa. Caravans cross into the Arabian Peninsula. Merchant communities settle in Rome, Tunisia, Spain. Families migrate into the mountains of Anatolia and the river valleys of Europe. Through all of it, Jewish communities stay connected through tradition, through law, through ritual, and through boundaries that, unintentionally, maintain genetic cohesion. Converts join. Intermarriage occasionally occurs. But the communities remain distinct enough that centuries later, geneticists can detect the history of this diaspora like rings inside a tree trunk. And now the story branches. 3 major populations emerge across the map. Mizrahi Jews of the Middle East and North Africa, carrying the strongest threads of ancient Levantine DNA. Yemenite Jews, isolated for nearly 2 millennia, show extraordinary continuity with early Israelites, with only faint traces of Arabian ancestry woven into the maternal lines. Sephardic Jews of Iberia, who lived on the Spanish and Portuguese coasts, flourishing intellectually and spiritually, their DNA holds a Middle Eastern core, but blends with Mediterranean ancestry, Berber, Iberian, and North African. When Spain expelled its Jews in 1492, Sephardic families fled across oceans, carrying their genetic legacy wherever they resettled. Ashkenazi Jews, whose story unfolds along the Rhine in medieval Europe. Geneticists studying Ashkenazi origins see 2 dramatic phenomena: founder effects and population bottlenecks. In moments when the community shrinks because of persecution, famine, or plague, the genetic diversity narrows. Then, as populations grow again, those few lineages expand, amplifying certain traits.
Here a pattern appears. Ashkenazi Y chromosome lineages remain deeply Middle Eastern, nearly identical to other Jewish groups. But mitochondrial DNA reveals something unexpected: European ancestry. Women from local European populations married into early Jewish communities, converted, and became part of their story. Their descendants inherited their mitochondrial DNA, carried it through centuries, and yet remained culturally, spiritually, and communally Jewish in every sense. As centuries pass, as empires crumble, as wars reshape continents, the Jewish genetic signature remains detectable, like a melody carried across time. And when modern DNA tests show Jewish ancestry, they are reading that melody. But the Jewish story stretches farther than the 3 major groups. Across the world, isolated communities reveal new chapters. In Ethiopia, the Beta Israel maintained Jewish identity for centuries, almost entirely cut off from other Jewish populations. Their DNA aligns strongly with Ethiopian ancestry, yet carries unmistakable traces of early Middle Eastern gene flow, subtle but real, like ancient footprints pressed into stone. In India, the B'nai Israel traced their roots to merchants or shipwreck survivors who arrived over 1,000 years ago. Their DNA is predominantly Indian, but faint signals of Middle Eastern origin whisper of ancient Jewish travelers who settled, integrated, and built a new community bound by tradition. In China, the Kaifeng Jews became genetically indistinguishable from their Han neighbors after generations of integration, but they carried the rituals, texts, and prayers of Judaism across the Silk Road, transforming a cultural identity into a living memory etched into their descendants' stories. Through all this, the fundamental truth emerges. DNA does not define who is Jewish. Religion, culture, story, law, and lived experience shape identity. But DNA can illuminate the paths people walked, the communities they formed, and the challenges they endured. It is a map, not of belief, but of history. At this midpoint in our journey, as we follow these genetic trails across continents and centuries, Take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. This channel is dedicated to uncovering the deep human stories hidden beneath our skin, stories that science is only now finally able to reveal. As genetic technology advances, old debates re-emerge, like the Khazar hypothesis, which claimed Ashkenazi Jews descend primarily from a Central Asian Turkic empire. But large-scale genomic studies tell a different story. The overwhelming majority of Ashkenazi ancestry comes from the Middle East and Europe, not the Eurasian steppe. If Khazar ancestry exists at all, it is minimal, a faint ripple in a much larger sea. Ancient DNA studies have revolutionized everything. Scientists now sequence DNA from skeletons buried 3,000 years ago, comparing them directly with modern populations. And again, the results converge. Jews from around the world, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi, share genetic threads that trace back to ancient Levantine peoples. Imagine the scene inside the lab: white coats, humming machines, fragments of bone powder dissolved and processed, scientists staring in disbelief at screens as sequences align, ancient letters of the genetic code matching modern ones, a connection incomprehensibly old and yet alive. So when a DNA test shows Jewish ancestry, it is not detecting a religion, it is detecting continuity, survival, a story of a people carried through exile after exile, across deserts and mountains and oceans, maintaining identity through ritual, through memory, through community. It is detecting fathers who carried their Y chromosome lineages across continents, mothers whose mitochondrial DNA traveled through countless migrations, families who refused to disappear into the background of history. The Jewish genetic story is one of the most extraordinary examples of human resilience ever recorded. A people scattered yet connected, displaced yet unbroken, adapted yet rooted. As we come to the final moments of this journey, across ruins, across centuries, across the delicate threads of ancestry woven into every cell, remember this: your DNA does not tell you who you must be, but it can whisper who came before you. It can reveal the history your ancestors walked through. It can connect you to a story larger than yourself. And if this exploration into the hidden echoes of Jewish DNA stirred something in you, curiosity, wonder, a sense of belonging, join us. Subscribe and share and step deeper into the story of our species. Because the story of humanity is far from finished. And here, together, we're just beginning to uncover it.